And this is a, peer-reviewed scientific article. And they're talking about how people that have severe psoriasis, right, which causes itchy elbows or something, we think of it as cosmetic. People that have severe psoriasis are more often likely to have also rheumatoid arthritis. And those who have that are more likely to get lupus erythematosus, which is another autoimmune disease that causes a lot of joint pain and fatigue. But people that have lupus erythematosus are very likely to have early onset atherosclerosis and cardiovascular disease. People that have early onset and in fact, people with lupus often die by age 40 from cardiovascular disease, atherosclerosis. But if you have that, you're more likely to have type 2 diabetes. And for sure, if you're more likely to have type 2 diabetes, if you have that, you're very likely to get dementia of some kind. Let's talk about how chronic low-level infections that your body cannot clear become quote-unquote autoimmune diseases. Now, why would fasting and or cutting out all of the carbohydrates from your diet, which is some call a fasting mimicking diet, right? Because your insulin stays nice and low, right? Why would that cause your body to be able to clear something like multiple sclerosis, which is caused by a virus? Well, the reason is because when your insulin is elevated, your immune system kind of goes on hold.
Annelise, how did you find carnivore?
Hey, Dave, the iconic question, and you are iconic. So I had a friend initially recommend to me that I try carnivore at a time when I was very overweight, which was around, 2017 is when I think he suggested it. His name is Josh McClure. He's actually the CEO of one of my startup companies that I have started. And he had gone carnivore, and he suffers from a genetic disease, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is kind of an autoimmune disease of ligaments and muscles that cause a lot of pain and degeneration. And he found that when he went to eating just steak and ground beef, his degeneration seemed to stop. And not only that, he felt fantastic, had clear thoughts. And so he recommended to me, because we were working closely together on this startup company, that I should try it myself. And I thought he was crazy. I'm like, you're utterly insane. I would never, how can you eat just meat? And I mean, I just want everyone to understand I was as resistant as anyone at the beginning. And in fact, it took me almost 2 years to realize, here I am, I'm overweight. I'm very small. I'm only 5'1.25". And I had gotten up after a time of significant stress. And also just, I'll tell this story of what I had done before. I thought, I should just try this. Why not try it? And I initially started kind of in November 2019, but there was a lot of backsliding at the beginning, right, where I would be trying to eat only beef and eggs, but then I would, have a piece of toast or something. I just couldn't stop myself. So that happened for probably two months that I was, trying and then not having the willpower because I was still carb addicted. But then I really decided January 1st, 2020 to start. So I've been, 99.9% carnivore for more than 4 years. So since January 2020, and I will never, ever go back. There's no way on earth I would do that. And I let me introduce myself a little bit. So I am 55 years old. So I was born October 1968. I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. My parents are, met in Wisconsin, and, they cooked for us with all the love in their hearts, exactly like you would expect, middle-class people from Wisconsin to cook, which was my mother made every meal from scratch. Oh, and our family grew until there were 10 children and 2 parents. So I have 7 brothers and 2 sisters. And we did have meat for every dinner, pretty much every lunch, every breakfast, every dinner, we would have bacon, eggs. But, we also had the toast. with butter. There's cinnamon sugar toast, all the carbs always mixed with the meat. But so you can imagine, like, at one big dinner table with 7 brothers and my dad, we were just fighting for the meat because there was never enough, right? But my mom cooked everything out of Betty Crocker, which was a cookbook written in the kind of mid 60s, and Better Homes and Gardens. And she was a wonderful cook, but every meal was kind of meat as much as we could afford. But then there would be rice or pasta or bread or potatoes, 100%. Like when you have that many children, you have to stretch the budget. So it would be like scalloped potatoes and ham, which is a lot of potatoes and cream sauce and then chunks of ham, cheese on top, delicious, but, not that much ham, right? And I was really active kid growing up. I delivered newspapers on a bicycle starting at age 9, which, kids don't get to do anymore. It's a wonderful thing about being our age. I know you're 50, right? And ran track, played soccer starting at age 9, and just ran and skied every weekend. So I was very active. So I had great musculature, but just it was like a little dumpling over the top of it, and not fat, but not thin either. And I was very frustrated that even starting at the age of about 11, I was frustrated by always feeling chubby, even though I ran every day, just nothing but exercise. And I never understood it. What's going on? Why am I this little dumpling, right? But I had absolutely zero awareness that carbs were bad for me. In fact, I had zero awareness that any kind of food was bad for me. And if you think about, sort of the 80s, right? You would just eat anything. If it was tasted good, you would have homemade ginger snaps your mom makes, and as many as you could get before your brothers grabbed the rest, It was crazy. So now, at the time, I want to just fast forward through my whole life. I had 3 children who are now 21 and a half and 19 and a half, and I have a son who's 12 and a half. So I had my last child when I was 42. And, you get to a certain age, sort of, you might have noticed, sort of 46 and up, your body now is kind of fighting you. And even if you were somewhat in good shape before age 46, now you just go down, and I sort of in 2013, 2014, I watched these documentaries, which probably many people have seen. There was one called Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead. I don't know if you saw that, an Australian guy, and another one, Forks Over Knives. And I watched those kind of close together, and they both really push more plants, more fruits, kind of a plant and fruit centric diet. Of course, Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead, the guy loses a lot of weight using green juicing. And I thought that was brilliant. And then Forks Over Knives tries to convince you that you don't want to eat meat, right? And so I believed it, and I sort of doubled down on, how the USRDA guideline says eat a piece of meat as big as a pack of cards, right? I mean, that's like nothing, right? So I was trying to like follow those guidelines, and it's funny because I still have a lot of very intelligent friends because, I'm a professor at Stanford of bioengineering. I have a PhD in chemical engineering, a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering. Almost everybody I know has a PhD and postdocs, and almost everybody I know is a scientist, in in medicine, biological sciences. So these are a lot of really smart people. But, they're also proud to say, I really don't eat red meat. It's a status thing now among the intelligentsia. In America, kind of the NPR heads, right? They all listen to NPR, and all the stuff that they're saying about, beef is bad for your heart and it will kill you early, and it's bad for the environment. There's nothing good about beef. Like, that's the party line that all of my brilliant NPR head friends like totally believe. And they virtue signal with how little beef they eat, right? And then, so they can't believe it when I tell them I eat only beef and eggs and butter. I'll eat a little bacon sometimes. I'm just too lazy to make it because it's splatters. But I just want to say, like, when I was under the influence of those documentaries, I did a green juicing thing for quite a while. And then, that didn't seem to go too well. I didn't really lose weight, and I didn't feel well. In fact, I kind of ballooned up, and I got all the way, and I'm so embarrassed to say this, but I got to 197 pounds just following the guidelines of no meat, more plants, lots and lots of juice, right? So that made me think, because so I sort of believe that like fruit extract was some magic elixir, right? That's what the Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead movie would have you believe. And so, I had been drinking beer, and I thought, well, maybe I got fat because I was having a beer when I got home from work just to relax. So why don't I instead, I'll switch to having lemonade, like with sugar in it, right? I thought, oh, well, it's real sugar, so it's totally great, right? Yeah, so I would like get home from work and be taking care of my youngest son, and by that time I was a single mom, and I would just drink like 2 big glasses of lemonade, and that's so much sugar. I mean, it's you know napalm for your body. And so I ballooned up. I got skin tags, those little skin tags that people get when they have too much carbs. I started to get a lot of skin tags around my neck. I don't have any anymore. My knees hurt, my feet hurt. I got a condition called plantar fasciitis, which is just I don't even think they really understand what it is. Some kind of autoimmune foot pain, but it just hurts so badly, like especially when you first wake up and you put your feet down, it feels like torture, and it just always hurt to walk. And then of course you tend to exercise less if it hurts to walk, if you got knees and feet that hurt. And so exercise became difficult, and I was depressed. And at that time, then, I was single, and I didn't want to be single. I wanted to find somebody. And so let's go back to me. I started, after my friend had recommended carnivore, I heard Dr. Sean Baker's interview with Joe Rogan. That was 2017, right? And I listened to it really carefully, and I was like, wow, because he was specifically talking about pain lessening when he cut out the plants and went carnivore. And, I believed him. And so then I looked on YouTube into carnivore, and progressively, I'm not sure I have these all in the right order, but I started watching Dr. John Berg, who's more keto, right? He's sort of big salad and meat, but he doesn't eat bread or pasta or anything like that. And then I watched Dr. Sean Baker, and then I watched Dr. Jason Fung, who's an advocate specifically of fasting and whole foods. And then Dr. Ken Berry, who I adore and I think is a saint on this earth, as I also think of you, Dave Mack. Dr. Sean O'Mara. The only thing I'll say about Dr. Sean O'Mara is, he says sprint, right? So I have my son, who's 12, is the same height as me. He's like 5'1". So we were doing sprinting races, and I pulled something in my heel because I didn't warm up well. So if you listen to Dr. Sean O'Mara, make sure to warm up before you sprint, because that took me out of my exercise for a while, but I'm back now. And then Dr. Paul Mason on Low Carb Down Under channel, Dr. Ben Bickman, who I've actually invited to speak at Stanford and has spoken in my class. I've had Dave Feldman speak in my class, the citizen scientist. Yeah, I'll probably have you speak in my class, Dave. It's called Advances in Biotechnology, but I'm getting very interested in citizen science now, because it's like, as a community, we're discovering amazing things. And also Dr. Anthony Chafee and the wonderful Carrie Mann of Homestead How, who's such an inspiration, another saint, Dante Ferrigno. And, I just want to say, when I found your channel, I found, the fact that you let people sort of just hold forth and tell their story in their own way, which shows tremendous integrity and patience, because that's not easy to do. It's fun to play tennis and go back and forth, but you're so patient, just letting people talk. And I find these interviews riveting, and just I'm so grateful to all the people that take the time and the energy to come and speak and tell their story. And it's extraordinary how much you can learn from someone's health journey, especially given that most of them are about, say, my age, right? They're sort of late 40s and up, most of us, right? So we've had some life experiences. We've been healthy and unhealthy. We know about this. But anyway, so now I weigh 132. I went from like 197 to 132. 132, by the way, is what I weighed when I was 16 years old. So, I'd like to be thinner, and I'm still working on that. But, Kelly Hogan, she's a wonderful person who's been carnivore a long time, and she started out, quite heavy, and she was just patient, right? She really emphasizes stay on carnivore, follow your intuition. Don't starve yourself, and just give it time and be patient. Your body needs to kind of heal itself and get into a good metabolic state before it's going to really get you down to that, sort of ideal weight that we'd all love to be at. So I'd actually love to get down to like 111. And I think I will do that. And maybe after I've done that, which I think will probably take me a good 6 months, I'll come back to you. But I want to also talk about my healing journey. Like what other than the things I mentioned, which was knee pain and foot pain and plantar fasciitis and skin tags. Oh, and I was type 2 diabetic. My mother has type 2 diabetes, and I had basically crossed over into the pre-type 2 diabetic. And that's really what made me serious, right? And it's not because I understood that type 2 diabetes could be cleared up by cutting out the sugar. I didn't understand that for quite some time. And but I can say, in addition to incipient type 2 diabetes, which made sense with my being overweight, I had been diagnosed with Hashimoto's in sort of fall 2020. And let me just explain for the audience, if they don't know, Hashimoto's is an autoimmune disease. It's common in older adults, but maybe a little more common in women than men. And what happens is, for reasons that are not understood, your body makes antibodies to thyroid hormones, T3 and T4, and it may also make antibodies to an enzyme called, I forget what it's called, but there's an enzyme, a thyroid enzyme that actually processes those hormones. And your body makes antibodies to them, maybe because they're around too much or something. And then your thyroid hormone is not functional because it's bound to an antibody. So now your metabolism functionally gets way too slow. Some people get hypothyroidism, but I think it's much more common. What I had was hypo or low thyroid hormone activity. And, when you look around you in America, you haven't probably been to America for a while, but oh my goodness, Dave, if you just go walk around, people are so sick. They're so enormous and they look so ill, and it's honestly heartbreaking. And they're dying for the lack of knowledge of what you're trying to spread, that we're all trying to spread. So I want to talk about fasting, because once you do carnivore and you've been on it for a good long time, now your whole experience of hunger changes, right? So you no longer have that sharp, insistent, painful hunger that you experience as a carb addict. Right? Now the hunger comes on gradually. It's pretty gentle. It doesn't really hurt in the way hunger hurts when you're eating carbs, so you can be more patient, you can take longer. And once you've become, as they say, metabolically flexible or fat adapted, then you're in a much better position to try to do a proper fast. So I wanted to lose some weight faster, and just experience fasting, because I'd listened to so much of Jason Fung's materials. And I also looked on YouTube at people's personal experience with true fasting, just only water, nothing else. And so I actually did a 40-day water fast. And I wanted to talk about this because nobody else that I've seen on your channel yet did 40 days. Right? So that fast started on March 21st of 2023. So just a little bit under a year ago, and it went through April 29th of 2023, and I did a full 40 days. And I want to kind of encourage my fellow carnivores that may watch this channel, that may want to lose some weight, to consider doing a proper fast. I've heard people saying, yes, and I fast, I do 72 hours. That's great, but honestly, 72 hours is just torture, because the thing about a water fast is the first 72 hours are hard and the last 72 hours are hard. Because I think there's a reason that Jesus fasted for 40 days, because I tell you, after about 37 days, you're like, I think I might die. Like for me, I got up by day like 39. It was weird. I couldn't even like keep water down at that point. Like I had to stop, but from day sort of 4 to 38, it was really quite comfortable. I was not hungry, so no hunger. I had good energy. I don't think I've ever slept so deeply since I was 7 years old. as I did while I was on that fast, like incredibly profound sleep. But I'd given up coffee on day 3 as well. At first I had black coffee the first 3 days. Um, it was a profound experience, even I would say like very spiritual, and beautiful. And I did not regain any of the weight I lost. I lost like 36 pounds. And I went from that pure water fast 40 days. I went back to carnivore gradually, first just with a couple of eggs the first day, and then, beef and eggs and butter, which is what we all love to do. And I want to say, like, when I then came back to work, weighing 132 pounds, people were astonished. I mean, I think at first they were worried because I looked like I was losing weight fast. But then I started looking really good, right? Like compared to what I'd looked like before. So I had colleagues coming up and asking me, what did you do? And I even convinced one other Stanford professor who's in chemical and biological engineering, Jim Swartz, to try it. And he's an older gentleman. He's probably about 71, 72. And I just saw him last week. I hadn't seen him for months. And he looked like a movie star. He looked so good. I said, Jim, wow, you look amazing. You look so handsome. You were old friends, right? So I can say that. And he's like, oh, well, I followed your advice. I did carnivore. And he's, and he said, I have so much energy. I feel great. So, like just walking around being transformed is a great way to kind of start up conversations. And let's see. The other thing I want to say is, many people have spoken of this. I'm always kind of a bouncy, happy person by nature, kind of, even as you probably noticed already, I'm sort of naturally very hyper. But but I would say that, being zero carb, being carnivore has brought me to a much better controlled state of my personal energy and the way I converse with people. I feel much calmer. I feel much less emotionally reactive. So if I'm in a tense situation, I find myself able to stay very calm. If I'm under a lot of pressure at work, I still feel happy and calm. So, even if you were only considering your emotional and mental state, I would say do this. But I would also say, oh, this is a fun part. So I'm 55, right? And I was single and I wanted to find somebody. So, I went on match.com and I started meeting some people. And, the person I ended up with was really the first guy that was really receptive. But I just want to say his name is Brian. He's going to be watching this interview. So on his Match profile, he had a picture of himself like skinning a caribou, because he had been, that 4 months ago, he went hunting up on Adak Island in the Aleutian Islands in Alaska. It was kind of a dream for him to go back there because he'd been there as a young man when he was on an Alaskan fishing boat. And so on Adak, there's a whole herd of caribou that subsist on lichen, but there's no predators. So they need people to go hunt, thin the herd a little bit each year if possible. So he went with like 4 friends and his daughter, and they got like 3 caribou, and he's got a freezer full of caribou, which we've been eating. And I want to highly recommend to everyone, if you can ever try caribou, it's so good. It's amazing. And apparently you can get it in Stockholm, but in Stockholm it's called reindeer.
Oh yeah, so that's how I would have referred to it. Yeah, that's how I would have. So I've had reindeer. Yeah.
You've had reindeer. It's good, isn't it?
Yeah, it tastes really good. Yeah. Wow. So and I've got to ask, is Brian carnivore?
Oh yeah. So now Brian, like, he listened to me explaining it, and he didn't think I was crazy, and he immediately was willing to try it. And he's 6'2" and he works, he has a very physical job. So he's very muscular and slender, but he just broke his back. Just about a year ago, he broke his back. He fell off a ladder and broke his back. And he actually had an out of body experience when he broke his back, but because his heart stopped and then it went into AFib because he hit the ground so hard. And but they brought him back, and he had to be like in a back brace for months and then in a walker, but he's back. Like, I'd say he's like 93%. And now I'm convinced, of course, you and I are both going to believe that eating a lot of red meat and eggs and butter is going to be the way for him to heal. And he's only been doing it now we've actually only been together for just under 2 months, but he's like totally strict with it, and he's feeling great. He can't believe it, So, and already, and he's older than me. He's 62, and already I can see his skin changing just in 6 weeks. It's beautiful. It's just beautiful to be able to witness the transformation.
Annelise, I've got to ask you one question, which just is kind of rising to the top of the things I want to ask you. Is my image of being at Stanford, just from what I see in the news and stuff like that, is like, the fact that you are not kind of going down the vegan route would make you a bit of an outsider, or like people would not.
Absolutely. My department right now is interviewing candidates for global and planetary health area of bioengineering. So we interviewed this guy who was trying to figure out how to make meat out of bacteria. And I got to have dinner with him. I met with him one-on-one and went to his seminar, and then we had dinner in this fancy restaurant. And the other guy that came to the dinner is the guy who wrote the food security part for the International Panel on Climate Change, of like the world, that IPCC thing. I don't even know exactly what organization is above IPCC, but he was basically, his whole life is focused on getting people to stop eating beef, and the other guy's trying to make meat out of bacteria, right? And I was just like, look, I have tenure. I'm the senior professor here. These guys are both young. And I just was like, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to be myself. And I told him like why that, how important beef is, and how so many people heal basically every disease you can imagine, even diseases that we don't even know the cause, like multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, plaque psoriasis, Crohn's disease, inflammatory bowel disorder, ulcerative colitis. These are autoimmune diseases which are hurting so many people. They're really prevalent. And how do we currently treat them? And I actually teach a class at the graduate and advanced undergraduate level at Stanford called Bioengineering Innate Immunity, because those are all diseases of an out of control immune system that has too much inflammation, right? And they really don't understand what causes those diseases. They don't really understand how to treat them, since they don't understand the cause. So what are the current kind of blockbuster drugs and treatments? Mostly these are so-called biologics, but they're antibodies, and they're antibodies that interrupt the body's inflammatory cascade, which is your necessary way to fight infection. So they basically take the signaling cascade that your body uses to recognize and fight infection, and they interrupt it by binding an antibody to one of the key proteins like TNF alpha, interleukin 6, interleukin 17A, all these different kind of signaling proteins. And, that's insane, because it greatly reduces immunity. And we've all heard the commercial, well, at least in the United States, you will have heard the commercials where they say, do not take Cosentyx if you have tuberculosis or susceptible to an infection, and call your doctor if you are dying, and that kind of thing, right? So, I teach about all those autoimmune diseases. And in particular, I sort of, the research that's being done for a lot of these autoimmune and inflammatory diseases that are so-called idiopathic or of unknown origins, what you learn, like what you can teach students is about the pathology of what's going wrong. They say, oh, these white blood cells are anomalously recognizing healthy tissues and causing damage and inflammation, right? And even diabetes, the funny thing is, if you really look into the literature, they don't really understand what causes diabetes, just like they don't understand what causes Alzheimer's disease, which is what I work on. And let me tell you something really interesting. There's a great little review article called The Psoriatic March. And this is a peer-reviewed scientific article. And they're talking about how people that have severe psoriasis, right, which causes itchy elbows or something, we think of it as cosmetic. People that have severe psoriasis are more often likely to have also rheumatoid arthritis. And those who have that are more likely to get lupus erythematosus, which is another autoimmune disease that causes a lot of joint pain and fatigue. But people that have lupus erythematosus are very likely to have early onset atherosclerosis and cardiovascular disease. People that have early onset and in fact, people with lupus often die by age 40 from cardiovascular disease, atherosclerosis. But if you have that, you're more likely to have type 2 diabetes. And for sure, if you're more likely to have type 2 diabetes, if you have that, you're very likely to get dementia of some kind, whether it's Alzheimer's, frontotemporal dementia, there are various vascular dementia, there's different dementias. And, there's so much focus in the scientific research community, which I am a part of, on, understanding the details of the pathology, right? In Alzheimer's, we have plaques in the brain. In diabetes, there's actually plaques in the pancreas, but with a different protein. So I think that the beautiful thing, coming back to carnivore, is that you don't even need to understand the pathology of those each quote unquote individual diseases, which I greatly doubt are individual diseases at all, right? And I'm sure you would agree that since everybody, when they cut all of the sugar and grains, all the carbs out of their diet, everything resolves. Even things that turn out to be infectious diseases. And let me give you an example. You just had someone on, I just watched earlier, who had or thought she had multiple sclerosis maybe. And she also had terrible migraines, right? Just nonstop migraines. So multiple sclerosis, just a couple of years ago, they figured out, studying huge Army database, it's actually a viral infection of the body with Epstein-Barr virus, I think, which is the same virus that causes mono. And let's talk about how chronic low-level infections that your body cannot clear become quote-unquote autoimmune diseases. Now, why would fasting and or cutting out all of the carbohydrates from your diet, which is some call a fasting mimicking diet, right? Because your insulin stays nice and low, right? Why would that cause your body to be able to clear something like multiple sclerosis, which is caused by a virus? Well, the reason is because when your insulin is elevated, your immune system kind of goes on hold. So people that are eating, you remember we were told eat 6 small meals a day, graze, even just doing that. And then, oh, by the way, I lived in England for a summer when I was like 21. And so, the food there, they call it stodgy, right? They like potatoes, like so much food that's kind of heavy. And I think Australian food is kind of similar to English food a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. And Scottish food. So it's all the same kind of.
Your people are Scottish, right? So I would say, having spent the summer there, I loved the Scots. I did spend time up in Scotland and I loved it. And they are wonderful people. So, the beautiful thing for biomedical research, and believe me, when the time comes, I will spread this, but I can't really, you have to understand that, especially Stanford is an absolutely fantastic university. And I want to tell you, like, across the board, the people are not only very smart, but also very kind, thoughtful, and polite. And even through all the political divisions the United States has been through over the last, 6-7 years, like, there's not been one cross word, not a single argument, no bad feelings of any kind at Stanford, because people are very polite. And, to kind of push your views on somebody else is not considered polite. So I just have to be careful how I conduct myself, because it's a very kind of formal environment. as a faculty member, with the students, with the postdocs, with my colleagues. It's a wonderful place, and they will catch up. They will catch up, but they really believe in the scientific literature showing the way. And I have to still figure out, like, how could I build this into my research program? I run a research group, and I have 12 people in my group, and what we're working on specifically is developing a deeper understanding of what we believe to be the case, which is Alzheimer's disease is an infectious disease of the brain. So it's caused by a polymicrobial infection of the brain, which is allowed by bacteria in the mouth called Porphyromonas gingivalis. So this is the funny part that took people a long time to figure out. You've heard of gingivitis, yeah? And periodontitis?
Yeah.
Okay, so gingivitis and periodontitis can be caused by any one of, say, at least 10 oral pathogens, but the one that's most famous is Porphyromonas gingivalis. And this is an anaerobic bacteria that lives under your gums. And what it does is it turns off the antiviral response in your mouth. It also disseminates all through your body. So it turns off the antiviral response. And then viruses that are so-called neurotropic that can merge with your neurons, then your neurons that innervate your face, like one is called the trigeminal neuron, like herpes is an example, and there are many herpes viruses, like the one people know about with HSV1, but there's also HHV6A and 7, cytomegalovirus, and a bunch of them. You cannot avoid them. They are part of life on this earth. By the time, say, you're 55, your odds of being colonized with these viruses and bacteria is about 100%. So if your immune system is weak because your insulin is high, because you're eating a lot of carbs, you got to think of yourself as being in a constant trench warfare with microbes throughout your whole body. And when your insulin is high, they're going to be gaining ground and you're going to be losing ground, right? And yes, our lives are long, but we need every minute of fighting back against our body trying to return to dust. Right? So keeping your carbs low, if you think of it as just keeping your immune system strong. Exercise also very important, at least 30 minutes a day, I would say, if people can tolerate it. Then you can prevent those viruses from infecting the neurons in your brain. And then you have an immune system in your brain that then thinks it's being helpful by clearing away your infected cells, so that by the time somebody dies with dementia, their brain is easily a third smaller. Yeah, it's shocking. So I think carnivore is the prevention of all of that. And we don't have to study the pathology. We just cut the carbs.
So this is very interesting, because I remember reading an article somewhere, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, about how someone somewhere, I can't remember what it was, but someone had drawn a link between people with gingivitis and later developing dementia.
Yeah, there's a beautiful body of work, global, many labs worldwide. But so I'll shout out the guy who I think is really the leader in the field. He's a member of my research group. His name is Dr. Stephen Dominy, and he was formerly a professor at UC San Francisco, UCSF, in psychiatry. And he noticed that back in the early days when HIV didn't have a treatment, remember when young men were dying from HIV infection? So he noticed a link between very bad periodontal health, gingivitis and periodontitis, and them basically losing their minds, even at young ages, like 32, 34. They were losing their memories, their personalities were changing, and that was because their brains were virally infected. And he then noticed when the drugs became available that could interrupt viral replication, that they would often get their memories back, with treatment. And so that's how he put 2 and 2 together. And then he started to wonder about Alzheimer's. And he published a paper in 2019 that really just proved that Alzheimer's can be caused by brain infection by this P. gingivalis organism. And, you know, what's beautiful is if you know what causes it, in principle, you should be able to prevent it. And he's working on that. He has a new company called Lighthouse. He's developed, you know, he has a drug that would at least, you know, interrupt like what we believe is the most dangerous effect of that organism. And we also are working on glioblastoma, another probably also relates to the same organism infecting the brain. Yeah.
That's so interesting. And the really interesting thing about everything, I mean, one of the other things I picked up from what you said is when your insulin's elevated, your body's like, oh, well, I can't do anything at the moment because I'm busy dealing with the insulin issue.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like, oh, and I wanted to also mention something really interesting that, you know, perhaps some of your other members and watchers are aware of. So I started wearing a continuous glucose monitor in late October of 2023. And I'm not type 2 diabetic. I should say, you know, my blood sugar is great. My fasting insulin is like 4, which is a great number. You know, I'm metabolically very healthy now, but it's fascinating to watch how my blood glucose levels respond to what I eat and when I sleep and when I do fast, because I still fast sometimes. But it's hard to work up the gumption to do it again. I keep sort of trying to do my 40-day fast again, and then I chicken out. You know, because I love my steak so much. Oh yeah, I got to talk about my how I eat now. Yeah.
So just on that fasting, I kind of get that, but I've got a more micro example, and it's like I've only ever done 48-hour fasts, and it's like you feel so accomplished after you've finished a long what for me is a long fast. And then it's like it just working up to doing it again takes so much effort. And it's like, yeah, but that you know, that ground beef or those eggs, they taste really, really good. You know,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. You know, it's just so hard to resist because as carnivores, like we develop like a very deep love and appreciation for how wonderful ground beef and soft boiled eggs and steaks taste, and we don't want to give it up, you know. It's like a love affair with real food, you know.
Yeah. So yeah, you mentioned about eating. How are you eating day to day?
Okay, so typically, and I will say I'm not 100% perfect because sometimes I have to go to these faculty dinners, and then I get to go to a super fancy restaurant, and Stanford is paying for it. So I do my best, but I do sometimes like have a glass of red wine here and there. I try not to. But with the continuous glucose monitor, it's interesting if you have any wine, and I know you gave up alcohol, and I was chastising myself yesterday. I'm like, hey, if Dave can do it, you can do it. Um, but you know, if you're wearing a continuous glucose monitor and you drink some wine or before you eat, you know, you don't get a glucose rise because the liver sees the alcohol as so poisonous that it somehow manages to not let the blood sugar go up, even if you're eating with the wine. So that might be the reason for the French paradox, because they always have wine with their meals and somehow they are not very fat, and but they eat very meaty, fatty meals, but they always have wine. But the way in terms of how I'm eating now, you know, I'll get up in the morning, I have coffee, and I'll put a little bit of whole milk in it, but I try to keep it very minimal. And I don't typically eat anything with coffee. And then, and I wake up often at 4:30 or 5 in the morning. And I also go to bed early. And then I'll around 9:30, 10 a.m. I'll start to get a little bit peckish, and I'll just have 2 soft-boiled eggs usually that I make for myself. I homeschool my son Finn. He's 12 and a half, and he's also mostly carnivore. And so when he wakes up, then I'll wait till he's hungry, and that might be about noon, and then I'll make a big ribeye and then a small fillet, and then we'll share those. And if he's more hungry than that, I'll make him some eggs too, and that'll usually be what I eat for the day. You know, I'll have like half of a ribeye, half of a filet mignon, and 2 eggs, and then otherwise I might just, you know, have a tiny bit of cheese in the evening, but I really try not to eat cheese because I know it stalls whatever good things are going on. It seems to stall them, and we all experience that. Like we all love aged cheeses, but they're not great for perfecting your health. And I should say, I order my steaks. So I'm in the Bay Area, and I order my steaks, and I have them delivered once a month. I got a huge freezer, and so I got pretty reasonable price on really good steaks. And I have 3 freezers full of beef because I'm terrified about running out of beef. They're trying to take our beef away. This is really scary. Like those of us who have all the degrees and the faculty positions, we need to speak up in defense of beef. And I will. I'm just trying to figure out how, because, I do a lot of studies at Stanford, like with mice, Alzheimer's mice, and we're trying to prevent them. We're like infecting their brains with P. gingivalis and then trying to treat it by upregulating their immune system in various ways. But I can't really feed the mice beef. That's really not their normal diet, right? I mean, I suppose I could. I did start feeding my cats a beef-based food, and they got a lot healthier.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that if you don't feed cats any meat at all, I mean, they'll eventually go blind.
Oh, I believe it. Yeah, so I think I made a big step forward when I started feeding them, grain free. I saw them get a lot more energy, start running around a lot more. And then then I found a formula that said red meat based. And I'm like, okay, that's what I want to give them. And again, a big uptick in their energy. So it's really good for them to, eat. And, I would probably the best thing would be to give them raw meat, but I tried to give them raw meat and they just turned up their little noses at it. I guess they weren't used to it.
Yeah, my cat won't have raw meat either.
Okay, not just
I
me.
have to share some cooked ground beef with her, so.
Oh, she'll eat cooked beef. Okay,
Yeah,
I
she
should
loves
really
it,
try
but
that.
she just won't touch the raw beef.
So yeah, so I just like you, and I also want to say, like, I've just been so impressed with, how many people have you interviewed now? Do you know?
About 250, I guess.
That's amazing. You have so much energy, and you do your job too. Can I just check this? You go teach children during the week, and you're doing these interviews?
So I'm not actually teaching anymore. Yeah, I'm not
Good.
actually teaching anymore. Yeah. This is
Okay.
fortunately I had some other stuff going on, so this is just, taken over as a labor of love.
Yeah, well, this is your mission on this earth, clearly, is to like save people one person at a time. Oh, and let me say something else. As a member of the scientific establishment, as a tenured professor who's won a ton of awards for my research and everything, they can just Google me and they'll get my page. And by the way, if you want to see me really fat, there's go look on images. There's a picture from 2015. I was like so ugly. But it's amazing. You can be transformed, by this diet. Um, it's so odd to be part of this medical research establishment, right? I'm actually in the School of Medicine at Stanford, and yet now know for a fact that all of the dietary guidelines, all of the advice, it's all not only wrong, but it's pretty much backwards. And where do you even begin? I mean, I have to say, it kind of makes me want to retire because I'm part of something that's not helping people very much right now. It's actually making people sick. You mentioned feeling angry when you, especially because in your case, you had a chronic injury, chronic neurological injury from your stroke, probably muscle and nerve. And when you went carnivore, you saw improvement in that. And that happened when you were a teenager and you didn't find out till you were 50. And that must have really ticked you off because your whole life you were dealing with that and you could have been better.
Yeah, it's like, hang on, I've been tripping over for 30 years. You
Yeah,
know, prime my early 20s when I was approaching girls and asking
yeah.
them if they wanted a drink or whatever, and I'm tripping over on the way to ask them, you know, like I could have used this then.
But you know what? I think that God must have given you that experience where you had every reason in the world to feel like true righteous anger, like proper, fully appropriate righteous anger, because that's what drove you, right? Like, why on earth would someone have a stroke so young? It's just, it's rare, right? And you could think of it as a cross to bear, but now it brought you here where now you're transforming. Like, you have 50,000 followers, but your videos are just going viral and getting out there. And, even watching one of those videos would be enough to change someone's life.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I hope so. Yeah. But you know, the messages that you've been sharing are really important, and I think this is going to be a very important video to get out there. So, one of the things I'd like to um, ask of you is if you were to give someone advice based on your experience with carnivore and also your scientific background, studying the stuff you are studying, um, how would you convince someone to give carnivore a try?
Yeah, that's a great question. And in fact, right now, one of my very best friends, who I've known since we were like 19 and 21, she is so 56, and she's having a lot of chronic pain. And she's a very strong minded and brilliant woman. And she visited me and in my home last week, and I was trying to figure out how to encourage her to try this. And it's really hard because she really just believes the mainstream media and what they tell us all. She truly believes it. But I said to her, look, Lisa, you're having all kinds of back pain, joint pain. She's having trouble with her eyes, her vision. She has to get like injections into her eyeballs periodically. She recently had a hiking injury that just took forever to heal. And she has been, for the last, I don't know, 10 years, eating almost no meat at all, a little bit of eggs, but, like absolutely no red meat. And I asked her why, and she said, oh, because it's unethical. Red meat is unethical. And I said, no, if you get it from a small family ranch, they raise these animals very sustainably. It's very healthy for the land, and I really don't think it's unethical. But I told her, look, Lisa, I love you, and it hurts me that you're in pain when you don't need to be in pain. And I will tell you that sugar causes inflammation. And I want to encourage everybody here in this audience right now, everyone who sees this video, go on to Google or whatever you use and just type in sucrose and neuroinflammation. And you will find blah, 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 scientific papers, studies on mice and rats and people, in which they prove that simply orally taking in sucrose, which is just table sugar, right? Just sugar, causes your brain to be inflamed. And they say that not only your neurological system is inflamed by sugar, but it's really your whole body. So if you just Google sucrose and neuroinflammation, that should be enough reason right there for you to never want to put sugar in your mouth, because who wants neuroinflammation, I mean, it's also well known that depression is caused by neuroinflammation, or at least accompanied by neuroinflammation. In all of these neurodegenerative diseases, neuroinflammation is a key driver. So if you would like to live long and healthy and pain-free, first of all, I would work on, transitioning from the standard American diet first to keto, where now you've cut out all the grains, you're eating only whole foods, and then you'll probably find that you feel better. But I think what we've all seen who pay attention to this space, generally autoimmune diseases don't go away completely with keto, and pain doesn't go away completely. That only happens when you go pure carnivore. And for many people, you even need to cut out the eggs like, and just have beef, right? Just beef and salt. Everybody seems to heal everything on just beef and salt. You know, you're still going to have the face you were born with, but it'll look a lot better than it did when you were eating too much pizza and burgers and French fries.
Yeah, very nice. So Annelise, how can people reach out to you if they want to get in contact? Do you have an Instagram or some
So
social
I am
media?
not really, I'm not on social media because I have so much work to do, but they can email me. I would love to hear from fellow carnivores or people that are curious. I made a carnivore primer, like where I say, make sure you watch Dave Mack and watch all his videos. And, I have like Dr. Barry, all the good guys. And I kind of go through and so I have my email, which you can add if you want, is, it's aebaron@stanford.edu. You have it. And people can email me at my work email, and I'll try to get back. If I get 50,000 emails, it may take me a while to get to you, but I doubt that's going to happen. But, I would say I am a scientist. I'm a very rigorous researcher, and I have studied this for 4 years. I pretty much watch carnivore, just like all of us do, right? I watch so many carnivore videos, and I'm constantly watching the science videos like Dr. Ben Bickman, and then I love the personal stories because anecdotal data is still data. And when Dave Mack has interviewed 250 people, and we pretty much all say the same thing with slight variations, that's a lot of data. So Dave, you are a great citizen scientist, and I take off my hat to you, because you've taught me a lot.
I appreciate that very much, Annalise. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story and so much valuable information with us. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Dave. It's wonderful to meet you.